Lancet Commission's research from 2024, which actually said that there are 14 modifiable risk factors that we can all proactively acknowledge and, assess in terms of how they impact our lifestyle that are going to help to lessen the chances of dementia.
So that means people might have lesser symptoms or symptoms later than what they normally would if these 14 factors are taken into account. And two of them are hearing and balance.
Another one of those 14 modifiable factors.
Indeed. Yeah. And all of your senses. So looking after your ears, getting your hearing checked and your eyes.
45% of dementias could be delayed or prevented.
Welcome back to Resonate the podcast. I'm your host, Lesleigh Smith, and this is the show where science, human stories, and wisdom all come together to meet. Across the season, we've been exploring how hearing, brain health, sleep, and memory are all interconnected, and how thriving as we age is not about slowly declining, but about small, consistent actions that keep our brains strong. Now, today we're asking a very simple, but I think fascinating question. Can you actually train your brain to work better? My guest today is Jude Walter, an educator, coach, and now co-owner of Brainfit World. And that's an organization dedicated to helping people understand and strengthen their memory and cognitive fitness at any age. Jude's story began with her own health crisis, a period in her 30s when she experienced serious memory and focus challenges after a breakdown. That experience set her on a mission to help others understand what's really possible when it comes to brain health. We'll talk about what the brain training truly means, the biggest myths about memory and aging, and importantly, I think, practical everyday habits that build cognitive reserve and why your brain may have far more potential than you realize.
Yeah.
Jude, warm welcome to Resonate the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, before we get into the exciting brain fitness stuff, I just wanted to start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your personal story and how you came to lead BrainFit.
Yeah, so as you alluded to in that introduction, if we rewind the clock a few years, I was a very busy, active 30-something-year-old mum. I had a couple of young kids. I was working full-time for a multinational. I was still playing competitive netball. I was on the committee at the kids' kindy, trying to be an awesome wife, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job of doing it all. But if I was completely honest, I felt like a little bit of a mouse on a wheel at times. And I just kept thinking, typical type A personality, I've just got to get to the weekend, or I've just got to get to the end of the year and it'll be all right. I'll have a break. And so I kind of just kept pushing. And one day I stepped off the plane at Auckland Airport, and I'd been away on a 5-city, 4-day roadshow for work. And as I was kind of waiting for my bag to come through, I thought, oh God, I don't really feel great. And between there and the sort of 10-kilometre taxi ride home to my house, I started to feel progressively worse. When I got home, I was sort of like, right, I haven't seen the family for 5 days. Kind of, come on, Jude, you got to rally, put a smile on your face, just keep pushing.
Yes.
As was my little mantra back in those days. And it was also my mother-in-law's birthday. So we were due out for dinner. So I was kind of like, catching up with the kids, putting my bags down, refreshing myself, got in the car, and we got about 100 metres from home on our way to the restaurant. And I turned to my husband, I said, you're going to have to take me home. I think I'm going to be sick.
Oh, wow.
And long story short, I was physically sick when I got home. But what was worse than that is when I tried to get myself out of bed a few hours later to go to the bathroom, I felt like my entire body had been injected with concrete. My legs didn't want to work. My arms didn't want to work. I was like a rock solid lump in my bed.
Yeah.
And so I managed to call my husband. I had my phone beside my bed, called my husband. He came home, and the next few days are still, even 14 years on, a bit of a blur to me. But I spent some time in hospital, underwent a huge number of tests, and basically was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and burnout. And so basically my body becoming that concrete block was my brain and my body's way of saying enough is enough. And I really shouldn't have been surprised. As I kind of mentioned briefly before, I'd had quite a few warning signs in the months, and to be honest with you, the years leading up to my breakdown. I'd done a lot of doctor Googling. I'd engaged with a lot of different experts and specialists along the way. There were times when I genuinely thought I must have a brain tumor because I was just forgetting stuff that, I considered that a normal 33-year-old woman shouldn't be forgetting. If I'm completely honest, one of those days I actually forgot to pick my daughter up from daycare. She was 2.5, and it's a daily routine. I picked her up on the way home from work. Daycare was between work and home. And one day I got home and realised that, oh shit, I've forgotten my daughter. And as a parent, I still now it gives me
nightmare,
it's nightmare, and even now it gives me goosey bumples just thinking about it. But in hindsight, that just shows how under the pump and under pressure my brain was, that I just wasn't functioning. And, it was that period of prolonged stress on my brain and on my body that probably had the most profound effect on me. And I made a commitment to myself that when I was well again, I had to find a way to help other fit, young, healthy people not experience what I experienced. And so, I was very fortunate on my journey. I was able to engage with a number of experts who helped guide that recovery for me over a course of a couple of years. And once I got back into work, I was like, I still have that itching desire to do something to use my experience to help other people. And I came across actually my background, my professional background is in public relations and communications. And I came across an organisation called Brainfit, and I was doing a bit of pro bono communications work for them. And the more time that I spent with them, I was like, hang on a second, this is the stuff that I've been looking for. This is the stuff I wish I'd known when I was, 30, 20, 12. This is the stuff I want my kids to know in due course. And so, long story short, I was fortunate enough then to be able to train with the founders of Brainfit, and I became an accredited Brainfit coach, which was what I've been doing for coming up 8 years.
Wow.
And then when one of those founders was looking to retire in 2024, I had the opportunity to become a director, to buy the Brainfit business with a fellow coach based in the South Island, because between us we're just so passionate about making sure we carry on this legacy and that we carry on this really important, empowering message to help people understand just how much they can do to grow and nurture their brains, and how, lots of the fear and you mentioned before, those myths that exist out there that breed this kind of hysteria. Let's park these and let's get proactive, because it's phenomenal what we can do to support our brain and memory.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you for being so honest and vulnerable. And it is such a powerful motivator, I think. And what you've done is kind of turned something personally painful and honestly quite scary, I'm sure, at the time, into something that you kind of paying it forward and helping other people. I personally am really interested in what we're going to learn over this episode, because I think you and I were chatting previously, and I was saying that I've always prided myself on my intelligence and my brain and whatnot. It's very much part of who I am. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, the brain fog, forgetting things, it was wicked. And then fast forward a few years to COVID, and then I ended up with COVID 5 times, and that also has brain fog. And now the fun of perimenopause, right? So, so I'm really interested in
in what you're talking about there. Yeah, we hear a lot, baby brain, meno brain, being menopause brain, chemo brain, the effects of treatments such as chemotherapy on brain. And the really interesting thing, and no doubt something we'll touch on as we go through this conversation today, but the key thing that all of those instances have in common is stress.
Yes.
And I think, and my own experience as well, that prolonged period of stress and that push, do. Our brains, when we are stressed, whatever the triggers or the cause of that are, our brain is not designed to operate effectively. We basically go into survival mode, which is often referred to as that fight, flight or freeze.
Yes.
And when we're in that fight, flight or freeze mode, whether we're consciously in that state or not, the memory centers of our brain are designed to dull.
Okay.
right? And so if you stay in that stressed state for long periods of time, they won't just dull, they'll switch off.
Interesting.
So therefore, your ability to create new memories and or retrieve memories out of your long-term memory really get undermined when we are stressed.
Right.
And I think that's been one of the most interesting things, since I worked with the founders to develop our Brainfit at Work program, spending a lot of time in workplaces and you said, thanks for sharing your story. The more I have shared it, the more people have come out of the woodwork and gone, oh my gosh, that sounds like me, or, I feel like that's where I'm headed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the lifestyles that a number of us are leading today for huge numbers of reasons, be it health, be it finances, be it work arrangements, be it, family commitments, whatever that source of kind of stress is, stress is real. And I need to be really clear that as humans, we do need a certain level of stress to function. That is ultimately what gets us out of bed in the morning, but too much of that has consequences.
It's all a fine balance,
Absolutely.
isn't it?
Yeah, we are not robots. We are finely tuned human machines.
You mentioned earlier yourself and another coach in the South Island. So I like that concept and that description of kind of personal trainers for the brain. And I reckon it kind of takes something that's sort of abstract and difficult to pin down and makes it something human, but also tangible and proactive as well. So I think that's really
and we, as you say, the personal trainer for your brain but came about because so often we would come across people and go, oh, so like, is this like brain gym, like puzzles and exercises? And in actual fact, it is a huge amount more. Right. And I know you and I have talked before about, actually we need to be doing, the Sudoku in the paper every morning is good, but it's not great. It's not sufficient. So Brainfit is actually about more than that. That is a component of it, that mental stimulation and challenge, because that's how we grow the cognitive reserve, which this is basically your brain's backup battery that's going to help you last the distance of time, regardless of what comes your way in life. So we want to do everything we can to build this cognitive reserve. And, the brain gym or the puzzles and that sort of stuff, that is only such a small part of it. And as humans, whether we're good at it or not, we all generally know just how important physical exercise is for all-round health and well-being. Yeah. And brain fitness is equally important. In actual fact, I like to think it's almost more important, because if you don't actually have a functioning, fit brain, then no amount of physical training, walking, Pilates or whatever is actually going to help you out. This here is one asset you only ever get one of. There is no brain replacement. And we have to be proactive. It's never ever too late, because our brains continue to grow regardless of how young or old we are.
That's really, so it's never too late. Okay, that's
ever too late.
Great message.
But the best time to start is in midlife.
Okay.
Because then you're actually giving yourself a good amount of lead time to build up this cognitive reserve, this backup battery brain power, so that when things start to slow down naturally with age, you've got a really full, solid toolkit to help guide you through that next chapter.
Okay. And now, before we get to some tangible things that we can do, because I'm really excited to know about that, I just wanted to circle back just a titch. You were talking about you worked with Brainfit and with the founders. And would you mind just telling me a little bit more about them? Because I believe you referred to them the last time we were chatting as the brain twins or
memory sisters.
That's it.
Memory sisters. Good remembering.
Yeah.
The science, and it is important to stress that, Brainfit is all science-backed, evidence-based programs that have been running in New Zealand for coming up 17 years. Yeah. And Brainfit was founded by two Kiwi women.
Yeah.
One of those is Dr. Alison Lamont, whose PhD research is what underpins the backbone of our Brainfit programs in their different iterations. And so when Dr. Alison Lamont did her PhD research, she was looking at the impacts of aging on the brain.
Okay.
And there's actually about 49 different ways our brain remembers things.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Yep. So when people say I've lost my memory, it's pretty much impossible, because it's actually 49 different skills, I guess, that you use to remember things. But what Dr. Alison Lamont's groundbreaking research discovered was that of those 49, there are 6
Okay.
that are absolutely essential to living a productive, independent life, regardless of whether you're 3, 103, 23. All right.
Okay.
So
Love
that's
this.
what the
Okay.
Brainfit programs
Six key
focus on,
things. Yep.
is these 6 key memory types, and really making sure you've got those firing on all cylinders so that you are, you are, as the name suggests, fit for life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Alison's research is great, and as many of us will know, sometimes research is quite difficult to get your head around. But Alison was very lucky because her sister, another Kiwi lady, is Gillian Eadie, and she was a career educator. She was a school teacher, then a principal at a number of high-profile schools, and then more recently at Auckland University. And so what you had between these two memory sisters was the knowledge, the science, the expertise, and an amazing ability to simplify and take this complex information and turn it into something practical that the average New Zealander, and fortunate enough now that we get to share this more widely than just New Zealand in the global world we live in, but that the average person could understand. And so in the 16 years since then, we've been refining, and obviously we're getting access to new and different information and science and research all the time. So the program's kind of been refined many, many times, but really dialing up that practicality that you talked about. What are the simple things people can be doing every day? Because, again, going back to, we're leading busy lives. When you say to someone, go, you've got to find X number of extra hours in the day to fit whatever it is in, that's when the alarm bells instantly go off. Go, nah, too hard.
That's right. That's right. Or it feels totally overwhelming because I can relate to what you were saying with the just keep going, just keep going. I mean, a bit like Dory, just keep swimming. But it's true. It's true. Life can sometimes be like that. So
so that's what we're all about, is actually not necessarily adding more to your to-do list.
Right.
We're about helping people to do the things you're already doing, but in a brain smart way.
Fantastic.
So one example, if you have, I don't today, but if you had shoes with shoelaces in them,
right?
If you typically, the average person will bend forward to tie their shoelace kind of directly in front of them.
Yeah.
If you do the simple act of crossing your legs over,
right?
So your leg is now crossed over on an angle and leaning over and tying your shoelace there, you've taken that from being a mundane activity to actually being a cross-brain activity.
Right.
Because a cross-brain activity is any activity where the action crosses your body centre line. So if you imagine chopping yourself in half, right down through your nose, through the middle of your lips, straight down the middle of your chest, and off we go.
Yeah.
Any action or activity where your arms, your legs, whatever, cross over your body centre line becomes a cross-brain exercise. So you're still tying your shoelaces the same way you've always, the same activity, the same amount of time you've always done, but you've suddenly turned it into something that's energizing for your brain in a new and different way.
Oh, okay. So if we pause just for a second and just talk about myth busting out there. So one of the biggest myths that I think is, and you kind of alluded to it, but memory loss, losing my memory, that's just normal part of getting old. Is that true?
So look, when we get older, everything slows down.
Yeah.
I mean, that is wear and tear. That's the same as our coffee machine we have at home, or the toaster, or the car that we drive.
Yeah.
Everything gets slower and a little bit harder as we get older. But what we do know from science, and believe it or not, it was actually only in the late 80s, so about 1989, that it was actually proven that the human brain never, ever stops growing from the moment you were born till the moment you die.
Is that right?
Yep. But the key there is unless you let it. And when we say unless you let it, what we're talking about there is it's on us as the owners and drivers of this brain to constantly seek out challenge, to grow and nurture your brain, to grow those neural pathways in our brain, which is what gives us that cognitive reserve, that all-important cognitive reserve I was talking about before, that backup battery brain power that gives us the resilience, basically, to do life and thrive at doing life, both personally and professionally.
So if your brain continues to, or has the potential to continue to grow your whole life, then is that Is that literally the if you don't use it, you lose it kind of scenario?
We use that exact tagline.
Right.
Use it or lose it. And that's where it's interesting when people do say to me, coming back to the Sudoku puzzle, Jude, I don't need to come and see you. Nothing wrong with my brain. I can do the Sudoku and the paper every morning. And I say, fantastic, well done, keep it up. What that's doing is that is exercising your brain. All right. But if you truly want to challenge and grow your brain, which is what we should all be aspiring towards every day,
right,
you need to mix it up. You need to try the crossword or a jigsaw puzzle or, something different that uses your brain in a different way. Because in the same way that if I went to the gym and I only lifted weights with my right arm, I'm going to end up with a beautiful bicep on the right side and nothing on the left.
Right.
If we keep using our brain in exactly the same ways that we've always done it, we are going to strengthen certain parts of our brain at the expense of others.
Right.
And so for a true, healthy, robust, resilient, brain-fit brain, we need to be seeking out variety and stimulating different parts of our brain on a regular basis. And again, when we talked before about the big 6 memory types that we talk about at Brainfit, if you can do a little bit of all of those big 6 every day, you are going to light up different parts of your brain and give your brain a pretty robust full brain workout on a regular basis.
Fantastic.
And again, it's not about finding extra hours in the day to do that. It's doing the things we're doing already, but doing it in a way that lights up that brain.
A bit like the analogy of going to the gym because you're a personal trainer. You might have like a leg day and an arm day, full body core, but you're just going to do your whole body essentially in that workout, or in this case, your whole brain in that.
And I think just before we move off that point too, just to kind of, I guess, put into context just how incredible this brain is that we've got inside our heads right now. And I know people won't necessarily be watching but listening, but if you were to put your 2 fists together in front of you right now, and for those who can see on the screen, it's like that. But put your 2 fists together, that's roughly the size of your brain inside your head right now. And inside those 2 fists, basically, are about 86 billion individual brain neurons.
Wow.
86 billion.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So an individual brain neuron, to give you an example of what we mean by that, at some point in your life, someone has taught you your alphabet. All right?
Yep.
So you will have had 26 individual brain neurons in your head for the 26 letters of the alphabet. Right?
Right.
And you create a neuron for all the new things you've learned over your lifetime.
Right.
And hopefully that you're continuing to learn regardless of how old or young you are now.
Yeah.
And then maybe when you got to kindergarten, or maybe it was school, or at some point someone said to you, Jude, if you take the T, the H, and the E and put them together, you get the word the. And so what happens in our brain at that point is the T neuron reaches out and hooks up with the H neuron and hooks up with the E neuron, and you start building this connection in your brain.
Okay.
And these connections are the neural pathways. This is what gives our brain the size and the weight that we want to have a healthy, fully developed brain. So the more of these neural pathways, the more of these neural connections we can make, the better. And every single one of those 86 billion brain neurons has the ability to hook up with 10,000 other things.
Wow.
So that T neuron could hook up with the H, brilliant, but that's only one of its 10,000 possible connections.
Okay.
So, you do the quick maths on that, you're at about 860 trillion possible memories. You find me anyone in the world who's making full use of that 860 trillion.
True.
So, when you find yourself going,
potential is nearly infinite, really. Yeah.
Unbelievably so. And so that's what frustrates me when people say, it's all right. I'm old now, I don't have to remember that. Or I'm tired today, so I don't have to remember that. Actually, you're limiting your full potential.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't limit the capacity or the potential of your brain, because there are so many opportunities for us to thrive.
While we're talking about neural pathways and like robustness in your brain, I believe we were chatting previously about like the analogy of your neural pathway a bit being like spaghetti junction, you know? So do you want to just talk a little bit more to that? 'Cause I thought that was a nice way to put it.
Yeah. And so as talking before, the neural pathways we want a really busy super highway of connections overlapping, like your spaghetti junction analogy. And so the illustration or the example we often give in our Brainfit classes is of a busy urban road map, for instance.
Okay.
So if you imagine a healthy brain as a really busy urban city environment, and if there is an accident on one of the roads in this busy urban city, the traffic just diverts, moves around it, and can still get from point A to point B. Might take a little bit longer, whatever, but there are alternative routes.
Right.
All right?
Right.
So that's exactly what happens if at some point in your life you have an injury, disease, just the impact of age and things kind of just slowing down. The more alternative routes you've got in your head, the better.
Right.
All right?
Right. Yeah.
But if we have if we use the example of state highway that basically goes from Christchurch up to the top of the South Island, one road all the way along that Kaikoura coast. And this happened a few years ago. Major accident on the Kaikoura coast. The earthquakes as well would have had the same effect. There is no alternative route.
Yeah.
So if you pull that back to our own human experience, if we haven't got enough of these neural connections and these neural pathways in our brain that give us this cognitive reserve, then if injury, disease, age, whatever, if something happens to that neural pathway, there are no other options.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I hope that that's a really kind of empowering thought for people, that anything new and different and challenging you can do is building that superhighway.
Right. So by exercising the brain, keeping it novel, using different parts of the brain, we're creating different neural networks, therefore detours, so that we have more resilience or robustness should something happen.
Yeah. The other way to maybe visualize it, especially for those out there who are keen gardeners, I always kind of like to think of a really happy, healthy brain as a beautiful flowering pot plant with lush green leaves. You put a little bit of water on it. In the case of the brain, you nurture it with some new and some different and some challenge and some growth, and you continue to get beautiful glossy green leaves and flowering shrub at whatever time of the year it's the right time for it to do its thing.
Yeah.
If, however, we neglect our pot plant and we forget to water it, what happens? The leaves shrivel up, the branches then get very brittle and they start to break off and fall away. And our brain is exactly the same.
Right.
Going back to your use it or lose it before,
yes,
bits of our brain that we are not using, those neural pathways, will not necessarily disintegrate, but they'll get really kind of dusty and overgrown. And it makes it harder then to find those alternative routes.
Yeah. Lots of potholes, lots of
potholes. I often think about when I live not far from Cornwall Park, and when you feel like you're on an adventure and you walk through a paddock that no one else has walked through, and you're kind of like trampling down the grass, but it's springing up just as quickly behind you.
Right.
That is not a well-worn track. But if I was to walk the exact same route through that paddock every single day, I'm going to wear that grass down into a beautiful pathway that someone could follow, but that I could also go back on again if I ever needed to. And the same sort of things apply in our head. Well-worn neural pathways become that much more efficient for us to recall memories and resend them back. Recall memories and send them back. You have more confidence and faith in those memories because you're attaching lots of memory traces to them and making them stronger every single time you do.
Well, we're talking about, if something should go wrong or as you get older and, just life happens. There's also the kind of scary information that's out there because there's kind of like this big tidal wave of dementia. It's all over the media and whatnot. So what would you say to that topic?
Yeah, so I've read all those headlines as well. And don't get me wrong, more people are being diagnosed with dementia, and that is going to continue to happen. The key reason being, or one of the key reasons being, we are all living longer. Yeah. And when you actually look at the number one determinant of, or factor that applies to dementia, it is age. So as we have an aging population, the rates of things like dementia.
More people are getting older.
More people are getting older, therefore it's going to become more prolific.
And living longer, I suppose. Yeah.
But alongside that, we can't change the fact that we're all living longer. We can't change the fact that that age is one of those key determinants or key factors in whether or not you may suffer from dementia. Actually, there is so much we can do proactively to make sure that if dementia became part of our own life journey,
yes,
that we're actually stepping forward with our best resources possible. So the more healthy, more robust, more of these neural pathways that you've got, the more of this cognitive reserve you've got in your brain, then regardless of whether dementia does or does not become part of your journey, you've actually got the best resources to step forward. And as a real life example of that, I can actually refer back to the founders of Brainfit, Dr. Alison Lamont and Gillian Eady, and their mother, Jeannie. She passed away when she was about 97 from dementia.
Oh, wow.
But it was only when she lost her eyesight at the age of 92 that her symptoms became obvious. And they actually think that she had been living with dementia at varying degrees for about 10 years prior. But because she had built up so much cognitive reserve over her lifetime, like she has a New Zealand Order of Merit for Highland dancing, she was an infamous bridge player, by all accounts. No one wanted to take her on. She was also famous at the St Heliers Library because she was that lady that would, walk up on a Monday morning and take out a stack of books this big, and then come back on, Sunday and return them all completely read. And because of that, she'd built up, this diversity, this variety. Over the course of her lifetime, she actually had so much cognitive reserve that it was only when her eyesight started to fail that actually those symptoms, the symptoms of her dementia became apparent. Yeah. And I think, that's a real life example. You only need to add to that, the Lancet Commission's research from 2024, which actually said that there are 14 modifiable risk factors that we can all proactively acknowledge and, assess in terms of how they impact our lifestyle that are going to help to lessen the chances of dementia. So I always say to people in my classes, fear leads to stress, right? And we've talked about the impact of stress. So instead of stressing, let's put that energy into actually focusing on the things we can be proactive about and actually making a difference and making sure that we set ourselves up for success.
I love that. As you rightly said, we can't change the fact that we're aging. We can't change the fact that each generation will live longer. Great. What we can do though is be empowered, use positive choice and positive change to our own benefits, and change doesn't have to be huge, ginormous. No. Standing on the moon steps. It can be little tiny micro
little things
changes,
done,
right?
Little things done smart.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Lancet, and that's really interesting research because the episode before you, actually, we were talking about the link between hearing and memory and sleep and balance, et cetera, but there's a crazy number that 45% thereabouts of dementia can be either offset. So that means people might have lesser symptoms or symptoms later than what they normally would if these 14 factors are taken into account. And two of them are hearing and balance too. It's quite phenomenal. And sleep. Yep.
Physical exercise.
Yes.
Nutrition, all of the things that, inherently as adults, as humans, we all know we should be doing this stuff, but this is an even more of a why. This is the what's in it for you. Actually, it's not just because, someone's told you to drink more water. Actually, this is going to actually help you to get more out of life and to thrive at any age. And I tell you, going back to that Lancet Commission research, 45% of dementias could be delayed or prevented.
45%. Phenomenal. I know. You can lessen your chance by nearly 50%.
Nearly 50%. And that's grown from about 40% only about 5 years ago. So the Lancet Commission research is repeated every few years. And we know more now today about dementia as we do about a huge number of things, thanks to the wonders of technology and science, than we've ever known before. And so, acknowledging and being aware of these factors, again, just adds to the proactive nature of what we actually can do. Don't sit back and wait.
No.
Get busy doing.
Yeah, because 50%, that's,
a massive.
Yeah, it's great. Now, investing in your brain and doing these novel exercises and lighting up the different parts of your brain with small, short, easy to do, with time frame challenges can really change your long-term outlook, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So maybe tell me a little bit about that. This is the quite exciting part, I think. So I'm keen to learn. And you mentioned what's the perfect age would be midlife?
Well, they say midlife. I mean, actually, in the Lancet Commission, they say the ideal time is somewhere between 18,
Okay.
18, and 65.
All right.
But it is never, ever too late. So for those listening that are past that 65 mark, don't, start crying into your tissue. It is never, ever too late because as we know, your brain never, ever stops growing unless you let it. But, it often and historically, when I started doing this 8 and a bit years ago, people would often say, oh, that's something I'll worry about when I get to kind of retirement age, or I'll worry about that in my 60s. And I think what the research is telling us now is actually the more we can be doing earlier, the better.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because we just give ourselves longer to build up this resilience, build up this cognitive reserve to go into that race, the race that is life and that is aging in peak condition. But in terms of the practical stuff, I think, one of the really simple things, and you and I have talked about this before, Lesleigh, that people can be doing without injecting extra time and complexity into your day, is start using your non-dominant hand. So for me, I'm right-handed typically. So I look for in my day as many ways as I can to use my left hand. So I try and brush my teeth with my left hand. Right. Brushing your hair.
Right.
Opening the car door, because every time I do that, going back to our cross-brain discussion from earlier in this episode, anytime I do that and my action crosses my body center line, I've taken it from being a thing I do all the time to actually being an exercise for my brain at the same time. So, using your non-dominant hand is awesome. And that your hands go with you everywhere. So you actually can't ever leave home without them. So there is no excuse not to do that. But even simple things. I mean, I did it on my drive over to see you today. The joys of driving in Auckland traffic. And, as I was sitting at the traffic lights, I kind of glanced up and had a look at the shop signs that were around me. A shop that I saw had a name that started with the letter T. So I was like, right, until this traffic light turns green, I'm going to just list off, say out loud as many words as I can think of that start with the letter T.
Right.
So I took that kind of idle, dead time sitting in the traffic and actually turned it into a brain exercise time.
Right.
So it hasn't added anything more to my day in terms of time and complexity, but actually has benefited my brain in little ways. I don't know, like during COVID, you mentioned COVID before. I'm thinking back, when we went for a walk with kids, they were a lot younger then, but we'd do things like letterbox cricket, like adding up the numbers on the letterboxes as you walked past them. And if you got to a green letterbox, you were out, and then the next person would bat, and you'd get the numbers added up. But you can do a similar thing with, I don't know, number plates on the car in front of you as you drive in traffic. Can you add them up? Can you subtract? It's just those little, you said before, micro moments that you can really use to dial up and empower your brain. That variety that we talked about before, and that being proactive, not just sitting back and waiting, actually looking out, seeking out things that really challenge you. And often people say, I would never do the crossword in the paper because I could never solve it. I don't know enough words.
Right.
And I always say, I said it to the Resonate Howick Brainfit class that I was running on Tuesday. Actually solving the puzzle, cracking the code, completing the crossword, that's kind of like the icing on the cake.
Right.
It's the act of doing it or trying to do it.
Yeah.
That's where you get the brain benefit. That's where you get that challenge and that growth from.
You're still stimulating that part of your brain.
Absolutely.
And you're still building
if things are easy,
those detours.
If things are easy, we're exercising, we're not challenging growing. If I go back to my gym analogy again, if I went to the gym and lifted 5 kg weights every day for the rest of my life, at a point it's going to get easy. But I won't actually I'll be maintaining the muscle, but I won't be growing anything. I won't be growing it or supporting anything else around it. But if I increase that weight a little bit at a time, over time, guess what? It's going to get easier. And then I go a little bit more again.
Right.
And that's the same sort of thing we're talking about here. Don't try and, you wouldn't try and run a marathon tomorrow if you'd never run before. All right?
No.
But you can break it down, and over time you could actually potentially run a marathon.
Right. And you'd never run the marathon by just walking around the block all the time. Yeah. Okay. What's something else? So cross brain things.
Yeah, anything cross brain.
Yep.
Variety, seeking out that variety of challenge. Things like, learning a musical instrument, learning a new language. Those are amazing from a brain perspective, but so could, like most of us these days are fortunate enough to have, iPhones or mobile phones that have amazing cameras on them.
Right.
Have a play with the camera on your phone. Have a play with the different settings on the camera on your phone, black and white, all the rest of it. It will make you actually pay attention to things around you in a different way, but you're going to learn a new skill. Maybe watch a YouTube video if you're really not sure where to start. You're nurturing your brain in new and different ways.
Right.
Other really simple things, it's a little harder to do in New Zealand now that we don't have as many 6 o'clock news options, but, even if it's listening to the radio, if you always listen to one radio station, one day a week, 1 hour a week, mix it up and listen to a completely different station.
Right.
You'll still get your kind of news and your current events and all the rest of it, but it'll be delivered to you by someone who sounds a little bit different.
Right.
If it's a TV studio, it might look a little bit different, but actually all of that is going to stimulate your brain in new and different ways.
Right. It's almost like breaking habits or staying curious almost, or just
our brains love habit,
getting out of our rut,
because that's how they survive.
Right.
If you the average person living in an urban setting in Western civilization is exposed to about 64 gigabytes worth of information every single day.
Wow.
That's enough to fill up half the storage on my iPhone every single day.
That's amazing.
Right. And I don't know about you, Leslie, but I get really annoyed when I get that your storage is nearly full message on my iPhone. And the only option is to sit there and cull stuff and get rid of it.
Yes.
And in actual fact, when we're forgetting things, that's our brain or our body's way of saying, hey, Jude, or hey, Leslie, your storage is nearly full.
Right.
But in my experience, when I was, 33-year-old me, I didn't sit down and kind of take stuff out and prioritize. I just kept on pushing more stuff in.
Yeah.
And so if you are finding yourself forgetting things, that's because your brain does have, it's incredible, but it does have a capacity. It has a limit. And that's why memory is an active process. We've got to tell our brains what's important to remember.
Okay.
On that journey. And so to that point, because there are limits to what we can remember, actually being really kind of mindful and purposeful and noticing the challenges and the things that we're doing differently are going to be really powerful.
Okay. So just on that, if we have to be realistic, right, and we're not going to practice for a month, let's just say, and then fill up our so many trillion bits of capacity that we have, like that's not realistic. So if we have a limit to how many things we can remember, what about things like remembering my car keys is a challenge sometimes. So how would I make sure that I kind of biohack myself to remember where I put my car keys?
Biohack, I like it.
Yeah.
So one of the techniques, and I actually use car keys as the example for this, but this technique is one that we teach at Brainfit, but it works brilliantly for car keys, but any of those frequently lost items.
Yes.
And we call it the triple trace memory trick.
Okay.
So I mentioned before the importance of using your non-dominant hand for things, because that instantly sets off a trigger in your brain that goes, oh, this is different. She doesn't usually do stuff with this hand. We need to pay attention.
Okay.
So why we often forget or lose things, misplace things like car keys, glasses, TV remotes, is because they're things that we do frequently. So it's sort of like, was that today or was that yesterday? And also they're things we often do in autopilot mode.
Right.
So we're actually, it's not that we've forgotten where we put the keys. We actually never created a memory for where we put the keys in the first place.
Right.
So I mentioned before that memory is an active process, and this relates to, memories of things you do every day, but also things that are brand new. We have to tell our brain what's important to remember. So if you're anything like me, Leslie, often you might find yourself walking in the door, arms are full of, stuff, and you kind of just toss the car keys to the side and keep on doing whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And you don't do that consciously, all right? So when it comes to try and find your car keys, you're like, oh, now I've got to retrace my steps. Where was I? Did I do that first or that second?
That's right.
So how the triple trace memory trick works for car keys, glasses, remotes, whatever it might be, is move your car keys instead of just coming in and kind of tossing them to the side. Move your car keys to your non-dominant hand, and that instantly makes your brain wake up.
Right.
Right? Then put your car keys down wherever it is that you're going to put them down. We'll say it's the side table. And as you do it, look at yourself. Actually, visually look at yourself putting the keys down on the table. So you have created already your first memory trace. It's a visual memory trace for the keys being on the table. The second memory trace you create by actually hopefully saying out loud, I am putting the keys on the table. Right? Now, if you're in an environment where that might make you look a little bit cuckoo, then absolutely say it in your head. But actually the power of saying it out loud, you use different parts of your brain. The motor skills required to actually verbalize words will have more impact than actually just running through it in your head. So if you can, without looking like a nut job, say it out loud. So now we've got a memory trace for having seen the keys. We've got a memory trace for verbalizing. All right. So then we go away, we go and unload the shopping or whatever else it was that we bought in. And then before we need those keys again, whilst we're unloading the groceries, we recall that memory and go, my keys are on the hall table when I need them. So now you've created your third memory trace before you need those keys again. Then you finish putting the groceries away, whatever it is, and what do you know, it's 5:30, it's time to go and get your daughter from dance. You walk straight back to that hall table, you pick up your keys and you're gone. And that is that active process. The more ways you can teach your brain to save a memory, in this instance, 3 ways, the more chance you've got of recalling that memory out of your long-term memory as a really robust, reliable memory. But we can't just operate in an autopilot mode. And I think that's something that's almost saddened me, I guess, the more work that I've done in workplaces and the number of younger people that come up and say, oh my God, Jude, my memory's terrible. And when you actually unpick it with them, it's actually not that their memory's terrible. It's that their focus is off. Because it's not that they're forgetting them. They're actually not taking the time to make the memories of what it is they want to remember in the first place because they're multitasking, they're distracted, all the rest of it. And we're talking about this right now in our Brainfit tricks for 26 is around the importance of attention and focus, because if you don't have attention and focus, you are missing a key component of that, the beginning kind of gateway to memory is this attention and focus. And in the world we live in these days, that holding attention is becoming harder and harder because there's a lot of shiny things to distract us.
I mean, I just think about an average day where, WhatsApp feed constantly coming
this is your 64, $1
million question, right?
Well, no, 64 gigabytes of information that's coming at you every day. There's always something.
Absolutely.
And we're not going to escape that.
No.
But we need to acknowledge that we can't just assume that our brain is going to soak up information like a sponge and then, be relied on to spit it out later. We've actually got to tell our brain what is it that we want to remember.
Right. And so that's the key is knowing that the world is busy and there's lots of distractions. Whatever it is that I really want to remember, I need to cut through the noise and triple whammy it, hopefully with my 3 ways to.
And another example, another common thing that people will, will come and talk to us about, especially in classes. One of the reasons most people come is because they think they're terrible with names and they get really embarrassed about being terrible with people's names. And, you think yourself, if you were having, for instance, having a work function in the office here tonight later on and people were coming in, typically, as the host with the most, we go around and go, I've got to introduce people to other people and then, then it'll make it easier for everyone. And we go around and we go, Jude, this is Ben and this is Bob and this is Sally and this is Margaret. And that poor person's just standing there going in one ear, out the other. I can't remember the first person's name. I think her name, there's only so much information we can take on. And so when it comes to names, if we use an iteration, I guess, of that triple memory trace, my big pieces of advice would be, as soon as you hear someone's name, say it back to them.
Right.
Hi, Leslie, lovely to meet you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then at some point, hopefully you'll strike up a bit of a conversation, you'll be chatting away, and use that person's name again as part of the conversation, because then you've given yourself 2 memory traces
Right.
for saying that person's name. If you've got an opportunity to introduce, if I had the opportunity, hey, Sally, come and meet Leslie. She's right into, and you've got a shared passion, away you go. Not necessarily when you're in front of someone, but, writing something down. People will often go, well, this is about memory. Surely if I'm writing stuff down, that's a bad thing. But actually writing stuff down frees your brain space up for stuff you can't write down, and it gives you something to review so that you can actually test that, when you do that recall later, was her name Mary or was it Margaret? So you've actually got a point of reference. But even on your drive home, I met some really nice people today, her name was Mary. So again, you're just pulling it, just reiterating, pulling it, rehearsing. I mean, it's the same for a dancer, an athlete, a musician. If you want, and I won't say perfect because there is no such thing as a perfect memory, but if you want a really robust, reliable memory, we've got to rehearse, we've got to interact, we've got to practice this information time and time again. We can't just send it on a one-way street to the long-term memory and expect it to come back.
There's a few bits in that I think that are really interesting, and using that analogy of like a networking thing, or you're at a party and you're trying to remember different people's names, because I think there's 2 bits to that. One, you probably should be kinder to yourself and not expect that you're going to remember those 15 people that you just got introduced to all at once. You should probably only think, I'm going to go home today and remember only 2 or 3 people's names, right? So there's that part. But then there's also, if you're someone like me, people often think I'm really extroverted. I mean, I'm doing this and things, but I actually get a bit socially anxious in big groups of people, So in that case, perhaps your anxiety level is a little bit higher. And going back to what you were saying with your stress,
100%.
Fight, flight, or freeze, right? Then there might be a layer of that as well. So then
for most
I need to be
people,
even kinder to myself. That
even the most extroverted people can have anxiety. I mean, even when you go on a first date, meeting a group of people, whatever, your heart rate increases, right? You get your sweaty palms. I've got sweaty palms right now, and I talk about Brainfit stuff all the time. And you are, you're not making me uncomfortable, but it's just our natural body's reaction. So you are constantly in this, juxtaposition of, bringing down the stress levels so that you can actually know that the memory centers of your brain are switched on, and actually doing all the bits you can proactively to give yourself that best fighting chance. In those moments where you do feel a little bit anxious, one tip I'd give you is 6 beautiful deep breaths. Often people say 3, but from a brain health and memory perspective, it's 6.
Okay.
Because 6 actually switches on your parasympathetic nervous system, which actually allows your body to enter recovery mode and actually starts to lower your stress levels, and then that in turn switches back on those memory centers.
Right.
So 6 nice, beautiful, deep breaths.
Okay.
I did it before I got out of the car to come in and see you, just as a reset. My husband laughs, so I do it when I get into bed each night. It's kind of like my switch off from the day to the evening. I kind of just lie in my bed and I'll do those 6 beautiful, deep breaths just to kind of go, right, this is next stage.
Right.
So practice it again. It's like your hands, your breath goes with you everywhere, and it's a great way to actually bring you back into that moment and make sure you're in memory mode basically before you actually put yourself in a position where you are likely to be confronted by quite a bit of information or people's names, etc.
Okay. There's so many good tips in there to unpack. Now, going back to the concept of cognitive reserve.
Yes.
Is that the same as, cognitive resilience, or like building those detours? Is that the same concept, or is that slightly different?
Yeah. So when we're talking about cognitive reserve, I used the example before of it being like your backup battery brain power. So, if you were going camping and you are going to be off grid, you will take batteries to allow you to charge your phone or charge the torch or the light, and you'll have a backup one just in case. And that's exactly what we're talking about. That cognitive reserve, as its name suggests, it's what you hold in reserve to actually help you to stay cognitively strong throughout your lifetime. And look, when we're young kids, we are on a really steep learning curve. Everything we're doing is brand new. And so you are building a huge amount of cognitive reserve at a great rate of knots.
Okay.
And then, potentially you're probably still doing that all the way through high school and university to a degree. But then once you kind of get into your professions, probably less so nowadays with people moving around in professions a bit more frequently, but it does start to plateau.
Right. Okay.
And then if you, as we get older, we also tend to start kind of limiting the sources of new and different. We do things the way we've always done them because we know that it's going to work. We drive to the supermarket the same way we always have because we know it takes 4 minutes. And when we're doing that, we're just kind of limiting, again, our ability to truly grow that cognitive reserve.
Okay.
But, things like social connections.
Okay.
Hugely, hugely beneficial for you from a personal well-being point of view, but really beneficial for your brain as well, because every time you meet, spend time with different people, they're going to have slightly different ideas, takes on the world, makes you stop and think, oh, I'd never really thought about it like that. They might have a slightly different accent, so you've got to listen or pay closer attention to get past that. They might look different. That is stimulating your brain in new and different ways.
Okay.
Every time you seek out new flavors, new colors, new ingredients to cook with, that is stimulating your brain in new and different ways because it's different to what you've always had.
Right.
Simple things like, reading different genres of books. Like if you're always a romance novel reader, go for a murder mystery once in a while. Again, you're still reading, but it's going to mix things up a bit for you. All of this, activity, this challenge stimulates our brain, grows our brain, and helps build that cognitive reserve, because cognitive decline and dementia are not the same thing.
Right.
Dementia is an irreversible damage to the neurons in the brain caused by disease.
Right.
Cognitive decline will happen to all of us at different stages of our lives as part of the aging process.
Right.
But that cognitive decline we can nurture and support and bolster by doing the stuff that we have been talking about in this episode. So again, it comes back to that. Let's get proactive. Let's not sit back and wait. Let's look at all those little things that we can be doing, every day to make a difference.
So building the cognitive reserve, is that the same as using our metaphor of building like more detours and just or walking across the meadow repeatedly to build that pathway? That is the same thing.
That strength of brain, the more neural pathways you've got, the more neural connections you've got, the more cognitive reserve you've got, and that cognitive reserve is going to carry you through life in style.
Cool. Okay. Love that. And that's completely achievable too, because it's not, as you say, your hands are with you.
Yeah.
Your lungs are with you. You're looking around. There's shops and all sorts of things around you. There's nothing but things that you could use.
Our world, it's not about expensive, new tools, new gadgets. It's about looking at what you're doing now and actually turning it into something that's brain smart. And that's what our Brainfit classes are all about. Is we literally at the end we have a visual of a toolbox and all of the different tools that people have learned over the course of those 4 weeks of classes that give them different strategies to apply in different situations. And that's what it's about. It's about the more of these tools you've got, then doesn't matter, naturally, if I started reciting my telephone number to you built up over the course of your lifetime would have a way that you typically remember phone numbers.
Right.
And that might be great up to sort of 6 digits, and then it starts getting a bit wobbly after that. So what are some tools that we can give you to help you with, longer digits? Listening to doctor's instructions and remembering those, because you can't actually get a transcript. Well, more and more you can now that they're using AI, but historically you haven't been able to get, a full transcript of everything they said. So how do you make sure you focus on the key bits so that you can kind of, action what it is that's going to keep you safe? Driving.
Yes.
Driving is a massive one. We actually have a Brainfit to drive course because, as many listeners will know, you have to reset your senior driver's license. And often people sort of come to us quite angry about, how dare they, make me reset my driver's test, and assume I've been doing this for years. I know exactly how to drive. And in actual fact, that test is not about your ability to handle the car.
Right.
It's about your cognition. It's about your cognitive strength.
Right.
Because driving is one of the most heavily cognitive things you will ever do.
Wow.
So I've driven half an hour to get to you today.
Yes.
So in a half-hour drive, in an urban setting, you will make about 70,000 decisions.
Wow.
70,000. That's why driving is tiring, even though you're sitting on your bum.
Yes.
Often after a long drive, you feel exhausted because you are in a constant decision-making mode. And as we've talked about, as we get older, that cognitive load and that cognitive decline means things slow down a bit. That's what that driver's test is all about.
Right.
And saying that, again, be proactive. Seek help. So that when you do go into that senior driver's license test, you know what to expect and you've got confidence that, my brain knows how to do this because I've practiced some of this stuff before.
Yes, yeah.
Don't just go in there and freeze up and go, oh, God,
Yeah, because that won't help your brain function or your recall.
Exactly. So again, the big 6 memory types, those are key to what you're going to get asked about in your senior driver's test. Those big 6 are key to helping you work productively in your paid job. Those big 6 are key to helping you, function as a carer.
Can you list what the 6 are?
Yeah, absolutely. The big 6. So I probably should have done that earlier. So it's a good test of my memory. But the big 6. So the first one is your verbal memory. So that's your memory for what you hear spoken, but also what you read. Okay. The second one is your non-verbal memory. And that's your memory for shapes and objects. It's also your spatial awareness. So
faces.
That comes. So it's not part of nonverbal. So it's nonverbal is shapes and objects, but it's also your spatial awareness. So will my car fit into this car park?
Right.
Am I lifting my foot high enough to make this step without stumbling? Okay. So that's your nonverbal memory. Then we've got your short-term memory, and this is an interesting one actually, because often people come and they'll say, oh, Jude, my short-term memory is terrible. I couldn't even tell you what I had for breakfast this morning. And then I have to break their hearts and say that's actually your long-term memory.
Oh, really?
Because your short-term memory is 30 seconds long. It is short.
Oh, my nerve.
Super short.
Wow. Only
30 seconds.
Okay.
And the normal range for the number of items that you can hold in your short-term memory at any one time is between 5 and 9 objects.
Okay.
All right? 5 and 9. And at Brainfit, we teach you some techniques to get beyond that 9. But again, short-term memory, it's short. And you've only got 30 seconds to actually help your brain decide, is this important? And therefore, I need to attach memory traces to it to get it down to my long-term memory. Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to get flushed out.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's one of those tons and tons of inputs that
we just don't have a need for.
Yeah.
So that was short-term memory. The next one is working memory. Okay. So that's often referred to also as your central executive, but your working memory is the part of your brain that gets the most work when you are working. And I don't necessarily mean in paid employment. Yeah. It's your decision-making brain, basically. It's your kind of analytical brain. Right. It's what helps you figure out what clothes you put on today, having looked at the weather forecast and felt the temperature. It's what helps you know which direction to go in when you turn out of your driveway if you're coming to work. Yeah. But it's also the part of your brain that keeps you safe.
Right. Okay.
So that's your working memory. Super, super important. Then there is your faces, your face recognition, or faces and names. So that's a different skill set. Yeah. Faces and names. And then the lucky last is something called prospective memory. So that's your ability to remember what it is you need to do in the future. So I have to remember to take my meds before I go to bed. I have to remember to turn the element off in half an hour once my dinner's cooked. Okay. And interestingly enough, the majority of the kind of memory fails or the forgetfulness that happens in a day for most people happens in that prospective memory space. Really? Remembering the stuff that we're supposed to do. Yeah. So, we do. And so the 4 weeks of classes, we deep dive on each of those big 6 and really dial up those practical tools that can help strengthen those areas.
So we've got these 6 memory types or these 6 cornerstones.
Yep.
We've got, micro changes, exercises that we can do to strengthen different parts of our brains. Yeah. You've mentioned before about fight, flight, or freeze. So we need to be mindful of our stress levels. So that makes sense. So the keeping your brain active with novel things. I mean, I think that's variety, I believe you said was really important. Yeah. Okay.
Being proactive and seeking out new and different is really important. And again, doesn't have to be massive things like learning an instrument, but it's about little things done often that are going to have the biggest impact.
Perfect. Okay. And moving regularly, obviously keeping your cardiovascular health as healthy as you can, because our brains need,
I mean, looking after yourself, we can give you all the tips and techniques in the world, and none of that's going to be any good to you if you're not actually looking after yourself. So the physical
nutrition, right?
The physical exercise is super important because our brain needs oxygen and blood flow to operate.
Yes.
How does it get its oxygen and its blood flow? By us moving and pumping that fresh oxygen up to your brain, getting that blood flow. So physical exercise is super, super important. And in actual fact, we should all be aiming for about 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week from a brain health perspective. Anything more than that, brilliant from a health and wellbeing perspective, but the minimum from a brain perspective is 150. And, we're not expecting everyone to go out and take out power walking. It could be gardening. It could be, if you're able to, taking the stairs at the mall as opposed to the lift. Just finding those little opportunities to get a few more steps and get a bit more movement.
And that also helps to keep input to your balance system, which is really important for your brain.
And another one of those 14 modifiable factors.
Indeed.
Around.
And all of your senses. So looking after your ears, getting your hearing checked, and your eyes. So making sure that the input of those memories, it's really important.
Well, again,
right?
We've talked about memory being an active process. If you're only part hearing information or not seeing information clearly, the inputs of that memory process are nowhere near as robust. So you're working with suboptimal information before you even rely on the memory
to try to then figure it out, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And you mentioned nutrition. Absolutely. That's a key part of looking after yourself. And look, generally what is good for all-round health and well-being is good from a brain perspective, but there are a few bits that are super important from a brain health and memory perspective. The first of those that I'd touch on is hydration. So your brain isn't a muscle, but it behaves very much like a muscle. But unlike the other muscles in our body, our brain cannot store water, and yet it needs water to do its thing.
Right.
So we need to be giving our brain a constant fresh supply of water. So, if you are ever feeling a bit forgetful on an hour a day, a week, whatever, really sense check yourself on how much water you've drunk in that day.
Right.
If you know that you've got a really important meeting with the lawyer or the accountant or the doctor or whatever, scull a glass of water before you go into that meeting. It'll just help you get into the memory mode, into the memory zone beforehand. So hydration, super, super important. And then from a kind of food point of view, there's a few things that are particularly good. Avocados, eggs, fish,
right?
Particularly the oily fishes from an omega-3s point of view. Our beans, and when I say beans, I mean like legumes, not necessarily green beans. They'll come a little bit further down. So beans. Then we've got where you've got a choice of white flours or whole grain. Absolutely go whole grain. Whole grains are way better for brain and memory. And then your leafy greens for sure. Blueberries.
Right.
And did I say nuts?
Not yet.
Remember now, nuts. There you go.
Right.
There's another one there. So nuts as well. I've got some great bits in there from a brain health and memory. And we've actually got a Nourish to Flourish ebook on our Brainfit website. If people are interested in exploring that whole brain food part,
I love that.
more deeply, there's some great tips and techniques in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talked very, very briefly earlier about all of the multitude of inputs that are coming in. And you also said, iPhones, everybody's got one. So we can't escape technology. It is what it is. And our lives are really busy. But in your opinion, do you think technology is hurting our brains?
Look, I often get asked, surely technology is making us dumb. And I strongly disagree with that. I think actually technology is helping us to understand more about our brains and the human body and everything than we've ever known before. And, when we look at what we know now about things like dementia, but around brain health and the like that we didn't know even 20 years ago, I actually think it's a really positive thing. That said, too much of anything is not good. Too much fizzy drink is not good for us. So if we are constantly eyes on a screen, swiping left, right, hour upon hour upon hour, that is not going to be good for our brain. We've talked a lot today about the importance of variety. That is not variety.
True.
All right.
True.
So, my advice to a, 103-year-old, 63-year-old, 13-year-old would be exactly the same. Make sure you are getting a variety of sources of stimulation in your day.
Well, I suppose
So
that also
use
affects
tech.
your focus as well, right?
And look, absolutely. At a young age, there is lots of evidence to suggest that too much device time or technology time really does impact focus and attention, or the ability to focus long term, but also emotional regulation and the like. So at a young age, absolutely. But actually, even as we get older, we need to moderate. We need to, I've seen it in myself. If I doom scroll for too long, I feel gross. I feel really angry. I feel really grumpy.
Yeah.
All right. So don't ignore those signs. That is, again, our body's way of saying, our brain's way of saying, actually, enough is enough. Go and do something now.
Yeah.
So no, we're realistic. We're not going, we live in a world where to be completely device-free, technology-free would be impossible, and actually probably limiting. Unlike our ancestors, we don't actually have to memorize, step by step how to change the tire on a tractor, because we can YouTube that.
That's right.
But we do have to remember a hell of a lot of passwords that our ancestors never ever had to remember. So we're using the reality is the brains we've got in our head, go back to our two fists together.
Yes.
That's exactly the same brains that our ancestors had hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
We're just using them in very, very different ways. And so the actual physical asset, the brain, hasn't changed. How we're using it has.
And like you said, nearly everything in life, moderation is the key, right? So anything too extreme is probably not going to be
and I think
ideal.
The biggest thing that, if there was one piece of advice that you take away from today and let it be this, that you have to believe in yourself when it comes to brain and memory. As soon as you start saying, I'm terrible with names, guess what?
Right.
You're going to be terrible with names. As soon as you say, oh, I'm too old for that now, or I don't need to worry about that now, you have to believe that you can do more. So even simple things like, I'm not that good with names yet. And the addition of that word yet is the motivator to actually go, right, I can do something about this. Let's be proactive, right? Because if you go back to that 860 trillion opportunities, actually within your head right now, you do have the potential.
Yeah.
All right. And it's you that needs to be your number one fan and your biggest coach and go, I got this. I can do this.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how old you are.
You're so right. I think you and I were chatting before, and I was telling you that I'm dyslexic with numbers. And if I just said, oh, I just can't do numbers, that's it, and just kind of gave up, I wouldn't have a master's degree. I wouldn't be here, doing what I'm doing now, right? So you have to believe that you can, and you have to believe that there's ways around it. Build those detours in a way that makes sense for your brain, right?
Yep,
so
absolutely.
So
and no two brains are even the same.
Yeah, like I might not be good at it today, but I'm going to find a way around it. I'm going to keep going until I can. So
I used to get so frustrated. My mum was a primary school teacher, and growing up, whenever I said, oh, I can't, she'd say, there's no such word as can't. And it used to drive me nuts. And you know what?
I said it
a little less now because my children are a bit older. But I found myself as a mum to young kids saying exactly the same thing. And now when I overlay that with the knowledge that I have right now in the context of what we're talking about, I was like, oh my God, like, it is so true. As soon as you say can't, you are just limiting your abilities. You are limiting your self-belief, and you are limiting the possibility for improvement.
Yeah.
You might not be A grade at it yet.
Yet. That's such a good way of putting it. So there's a couple more things I wanted to touch on. One is, so I do something new. I keep variety. I stay curious. I get other parts of my brain activated, or I create a new memory.
Yeah.
It's not just creating the memory though, right? It's how I focus on it, my internal self-talk. But how do I access it again? Like when you're talking about
access, I mean, the ultimate kind of holy grail, and I think lots of people kind of visualize it as a treasure chest, which is your long-term memory, the place where all the memories go and get stored,
or
and
some
filed.
Giant library,
right? And they get filed away in the library. And actually, your long-term memory isn't like that, because what happens is memories go to your long-term memory, but as we talked about before, their working memory and that central executive, you are constantly in the course of your day, every day, drawing on your past knowledge, your long-term memories to help you solve the problems, the challenges, deal with the things that are put in front of you today.
Right. Okay.
So those memories are coming out of your long-term memory, being used in a working memory, being applied to a different context, and then sent back again.
Okay.
And every time you do that, the memory traces are new, but they get stronger, a little bit like walking through the grass in the paddock again.
Okay.
And so that strength of that memory trace changes the more you use the information. That's why someone who is good with numbers and has spent their life, potentially they're an accountant or whatever it is, and they've spent their life with numbers, those numbers, numbers will come easier to them because it is a really well-worn track and they've got really strong memory traces for numbers, the way that they need to do the accounts, how you solve this problem, whatever. For you as an audiologist, you will have very well honed neural pathways for the stuff that you do every day. And so that's fine when it's something we do often. But again, it's about telling our brain what's important to remember. It might not be stuff we're doing every day, but, retrieving those memory traces is active as well. And the best way, we talked before about rehearsal.
Okay.
Use that information often. And dust it off before you're standing at a family reunion in front of your cousin's ex-wife. Going, oh my goodness, I should know your name. Have done a bit of that dusting off beforehand, practice, rehearse, so you actually can step forward with confidence.
I believe we were also talking about in order to kind of archive those memories or put them into the right place in the library, in my analogy, sleep is really important as well.
And I know you've spoken to a sleep expert or you are going to speak to a sleep expert, but, alongside your physical movement, your nutrition, that hydration, etc., sleep is unbelievably important from a brain and memory perspective. Because there's two super important key things that happen when you are sleeping, and they can only happen when you're sleeping.
Okay.
And the first of those is that your memories that you make today get consolidated when you have 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we mean consolidated, we basically mean kind of like the filing that happens where they get sorted into the right department so that you can then recall them at a later date. And that's why often if you want a kind of real life but very annoying illustration of that consolidation in action, those aha moments that maybe come to you at 3 a.m. in the morning. It's like, oh, her name was Mary. It's no good to you at 3 a.m. in the morning. You needed that at 3 p.m. when you were standing in front of her in the cafe.
That is so me. That's so me.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is memory consolidation action. At 3 a.m., that's when your brain had got to the point where it was filing that little part of your day and sorting your memories into the kind of right files. So memory consolidation can only happen with that 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. And that will be confronting to a lot of your listeners because I know and I acknowledge, sleep is difficult for most people for periods of time in their life. For some people, ongoing.
Brain, is sleep deprivation and, perimenopause.
Sleep deprivation was a form of torture in the war for very good reason. Everything is hard when you're tired, and memory will be no different. But I'm with you on the whole perimenopause menopause journey at the moment. And at the moment, 4 a.m. seems to be my time of the day, night, where I become hugely alert. I do go back to sleep again, but for whatever reason, that's when my brain switches on and needs to deal with some stuff.
Right.
But that 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep, that is what the experts say we need from a brain health and memory perspective. Now, you might be saying, but I can function on 6 hours. We're not talking about functioning, and that's cool. Like we all can.
We're
like you
trying
go
to
back to baby brain already or whatever.
Yeah, how to survive, right?
You get used to that. But actually from a brain health over the course of your lifetime, that quality sleep becomes super important.
Yeah.
And if you don't get that 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep tonight, for instance, then it'll be tomorrow night before the memories from today are consolidated. So the level of kind of detail and accuracy that you're actually storing away in your long-term memory is another 24 hours delayed.
Well, that makes sense.
So, the quality
it'll
of
be
the
degraded
quality.
not as crisp and clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, if you are someone who struggles with sleep currently, or at some point in your life ahead of now, having heard this, you find yourself in that position, I'd really encourage you to seek out help from sleep experts, because there's a number of different things that can cause it for different people for different reasons. But it is a game changer from a health and wellbeing point of view, but a real game changer from a brain health perspective. The second most important thing that can only happen when you're sleeping is that is when your brain does its housekeeping. Basically, it's when it flushes out the kind of toxins and the plaques, the nasties out of your brain, and left alone to their own devices, those are the plaques and toxins that will attach themselves to the brain neurons that can then lead over time to things like dementia.
Right.
So obviously we don't want those hanging around, and sleep is the only time that cleaning process happens and those plaques can get flushed. So sleep, unbelievably important. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting that you say that, because a really good friend of mine had a serious brain injury, and her doctor was saying that if she didn't get enough hours sleep, they wouldn't even let her go home from the hospital, because when you're sleeping, that's when your brain does its healing of itself as well. And, it's probably that cleaning
like
out
a
of the
computer.
toxins.
If you actually shut down your computer at the end of the day or the end of the week, often the screen will go black.
Yeah.
But you'll still hear a whirring sound in the background. That's like us sleeping. We shut our eyes, the world goes black, the screen goes black. But actually there's a hell of a lot happening behind the scenes.
Right.
So unbelievably important. And it's because I think too, when you are sleeping, your other senses are dulled. You're not taking on new information. So it actually frees the brain up to do its sorting without being distracted by the new stuff that's coming in.
Ooh, I've learned so much today. This is really...
Your brain's hurting?
I wonder if I'll recall it and remember it tomorrow. But no, I think it's really inspiring though, because it's we are getting older. We know that things will get slower, but is the key here, where there's so many positive, easy, fast things that we can do, and I think having this kind of conversation just sort of normalizes it, and hopefully there's people at home who, if they are worried about their memory, people will be terrified. And so they probably aren't talking about it with their family or their loved ones because they're worried about consequences, when the whole point of this conversation is to say, don't sit at home.
Don't hide.
Alone. Don't be on your own. We can help talk about it with people who love you.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the classes that we do, the community classes and the Resonate classes that we're doing in partnership with you guys at the moment, is when you see people who generally don't know each other, get to know each other over a course of the 4 weeks.
Yes.
But actually the kind of size of relief when they realize that, oh my goodness, what she's talking about, that's how I felt. I'm not alone.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the more we talk about this stuff, the more we realize, what's normal, what's not normal, but what can I be doing about this? Let's stop worrying and let's actually get busy doing. Let's be proactive and actually say, I'm not going to worry about this until I've taken these 2 steps to see whether, to kind of define what this is.
Exactly.
And everyone's different. Everyone comes to the classes or does our online courses for their own reasons. Everyone's at different stages of their life journey with different motivators. But at the end of the day, the asset that we're all striving to get the most out of is the same in all of us. That's beautiful brain.
That's true.
Between our 2 ears right now.
And so we might as well just all come together to help each other, because then, then hopefully it's not scary. You don't have that emotional reaction. You don't have that fight, flight, or freeze. So you're calmer. You're happier because you're having that social interaction, which keeps your brain happy, right? And
stimulated.
New tricks and having new conversations and whatnot.
And if classes or our online courses seem kind of too scary to start with, have a look at our website and our resources section. There's a whole lot of free articles on there to actually kind of get you thinking and to kind of fuel some of that kind of creativity and that curiosity, and then hopefully with that you'll start to get a feel for what it's all about and realize actually there is a lot that you can be doing for yourself.
And that's a perfect segue because March is Brain Awareness Month.
It is
right?
Brain Awareness Month.
Yeah. So the conversation and the timing of this conversation is
perfect.
Kind of perfect, isn't it? Yeah, even
absolutely.
it's not perfect, but it's close to perfect as we can get.
Yeah, it's a timely reminder. Like, there's no bad time, but actually today is the best time to start doing something about it because all those little baby
it's
steps.
Never ever too late. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier about your the ebook for
Nourish to Flourish.
That's
yeah,
it.
there's a few different ebooks on there, but one of them that's quite popular is our Nourish to Flourish, which is all around the food and foods that are good for the brain.
Yep.
So yeah, that's in its kind of third edition now, so it's been around for a while. But that is there. As I say, there are printed books as well. We've got a couple of printed books written by our founders that are there for people who like to actually have something tactile in front of them.
Great.
Online courses if getting to a community class isn't the right thing for you, or if we don't have one in your area at a time that suits. But then also the community classes as well. If you do want to combine some of this learning with some of those other awesome facets like social connection, then that's also a great way to get kind of some tailored small group with an accredited BrainFit coach training and some of your questions and kind of queries or concerns answered.
Right. And what about BrainFit tricks for 26?
Yeah. So this year we've launched our initiative, which is BrainFit Tricks for 26. So this is again really trying to dial up these proactive baby steps that people can take. So every week we're giving free advice across our social media channels, so across our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube. And each week it's a new little mini trick that you can do in under a minute that'll help you on this brain health and memory journey.
I love that.
So if you do nothing else to nurture your brain and memory in the week, watch those tiny little short under a minute videos and give it a go, because again that could be those first little baby steps that actually help you get confidence on this journey.
There's micro changes to thrive. Cool. I mean, it's incredibly generous, but I love the practicality of it. And I think that really speaks to my nature. That makes it quite tangible, and you can.
We just want to empower people. We want people to realize just how much they can do, and if they need more support and guidance from experts like our trained coaches, then that's there. But actually, this is something that's relevant to all of us, young and old, and the more we can start kind of talking about this, I'd love to live in a world where kind of brain fitness got as much kind of airtime as the importance of physical fitness. And the only way that's going to happen is by us having conversations like this, and by people just truly realizing just how much
normalizing it.
We have.
Absolutely.
So, I think actually probably for me personally, one of the most kind of the single biggest aha moment I had post my breakdown and working with the experts that helped me on my recovery journey was just how much I was multitasking. And I know now, and science shows us, it's actually physically impossible for the human brain to do more than one thing at a time. Physically impossible. The word multitasking actually only became a word once computers were invented, because computers, the way they're designed, they can do dual processing in behind. Humans don't have dual processing capabilities. So it is physically impossible for the human brain to do more than one thing at a time. So when we think we're being really efficient and multitasking, what we're actually doing is we're just jumping back and forward, back and forward, back and forward between 1, 2, 3, 5 different things really, really quickly.
Right.
And what that's doing is using up a huge amount of brain power, this cognitive reserve, very, very quickly. So we are draining our brain battery, which doesn't leave a lot of cognitive reserve left for the things that we actually need it for, like making decisions.
Wow, yeah.
So, if you've got multiple tabs open on your computer, or if you are talking to someone on the phone whilst you're cooking dinner.
Yes.
You are draining your brain. You are putting unnecessary pressures on your brain. You're also probably not giving your undivided attention to the cooking, or to the friend that you're talking to on the phone.
True.
So actually, wherever you possibly can, in the same way we talk about, being, that self-belief and seeking out variety. Don't overload your brain would be equally as important, because that overload, I mean, I'm a walking, talking example of what happens when you push that overload to the max. But yeah, just remember your brain is only capable of doing one thing at a time. So are you really being, that efficient? Microsoft actually even did some research on it, the captains of efficiency.
Yeah.
And they actually think that from the research they did, that when you multitask, it can end up taking you actually longer to complete the tasks, and you're up to 50% longer to complete the tasks.
Oh, wow.
And you're more likely to make mistakes. So actually what we think of as efficient is actually potentially highly inefficient.
So if you go back to that example of talking to your friend while you're cooking, the quality of the conversation of your conversation, like how much you remember and maybe content of what you talked about, but also the quality of your dinner as well.
Did I put the salt and pepper in already or not? And now we've got a really salty dinner. Or, it's all of those things. I think about it, and I was notorious for this, and I still, I talk about this stuff all the time, and I still, I'm a human. I have to sense check myself and give myself a little uppercut every now and then. I will be making dinner, and then the kids will ask me a question about homework, and then the phone will ring, and then I'm just like, hang on, Jude. One thing at a time. What's the priority right now? Okay, cool. Yeah. Right, kids, I'll be with you in 5 minutes once I've finished chopping the carrots and got them in the, got them in the pan or whatever it is. Yeah. And that's mum calling, I'll call her back. I'll let it go to voicemail, but I'll call her back after I've done the homework. Actually be kind to yourself, because we said before, your brain isn't a sponge. It doesn't just soak stuff up. There is a limit and a capacity, and we have to tell it what's important. What's important right now is X. Food for thought. Food for thought, because it's not easy. And as I say, I still have to catch myself on it when when I find myself doing it. It's like, here we go again. Yeah. Old habits die hard.
They do.
But they are,
I'm thinking I'm definitely a culprit of that for sure, with a million tabs open and emails pinging and your phone blowing up, and it's difficult.
And when I do the Brainfit at Work stuff, often people say, well, that's the whole nature of my job, executive assistants and admin, where it's just like that's their job, is to answer the phone when someone walks through the door and all the rest of it. But again, no one is going to be upset if you say to the person who just walked in the door, can you give me 1 minute so you can actually finish the conversation, or deal with what's on the phone, then type the email, that sort of stuff is you've just got to get better at managing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or acknowledging it, catching yourself when you're doing it is the first step.
Yeah. And putting those breaks in place to go, just
hold fire.
One thing at a time. Yeah. And being kind to yourself too, I guess, not assuming or maybe expecting might be a better word, that you can do it all, maybe just being kind and going, you know what, I'm just going to do these 3 things or something within this time frame, instead of my whole to-do list or something.
And even, writing your to-do list or writing stuff down so that you don't have a constant to-do list ruminating over and over and over in your head, because when you're doing that, the only way your brain knows to not forget that to-do list is to just keep repeating it. Again, using up brain power, using up battery. If you write it down, you don't have to do the whole ruminating over it. You can park it, go back, review it. Oh, yep, I've done that. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was going to do, that's the next thing I'm going to do. Yeah.
Well, what really stays with me from this conversation is how hopeful it is, and science tells us that memory loss isn't inevitable, that our brains are adaptable, they're alive, and ready to learn the entire way through life. So that's such an incredible, hopeful message, right?
Yeah.
And just like any muscle, your brain and its potential and its functionality, it will strengthen through use and attention. So I wanted to thank you, Jude, for coming in and reminding us that thriving at any age, it starts, between the ears with curiosity, community, and courage, I think.
Beautifully summed up. Couldn't agree more. So thank you very much for having me.
It's been a true delight. And if any of you at home want to know more, Jude's got a huge amount of resource on the website, brainfit.world. You'll find Brainfit courses, newsletter, the new free Brainfit Tricks for 26 challenge. And I'm excited actually to try those myself.
Good girl.
Easy, succinct, bite-sized pieces that take about a minute or so to start building a stronger memory today. And we also have all of these resources on our website as well. So you can jump on our website, resonatehealth.co.nz/podcast, And if anybody wants a bit more information as well about the link between your brain and hearing and sleep and balance, we've sort of touched on all of these things today. We do have a comprehensive guide to hearing that you can have a free download of the PDF, or you can even ask for a free paper copy. So we'll send that out to you as well. So if you jump on resonatehealth.co.nz/podcast, you'll find all of the collective resources. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Lesleigh Smith, and this is Resonate, the podcast. If anything you've heard here today resonates with you, please carry it forward and let it echo in your own life. Continue this conversation and share these ideas with someone that you think might find this useful. We'll see you back here next time.